Let's get the microphone here. Hello, everyone. Hello, all. I trust you can all see and hear me. It is good to be back with you all after, I guess it's been 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm back in Seattle on a cloudy day. Next Sunday, I actually take possession of my new home, which I will be there for a while, I'm pretty sure. Shortly before Tea with G started, well, about an hour or so ago, somebody asked me the question, is there anything impossible? They were really wondering about this thing about what's possible and what isn't possible. And my response was, what's possible and what isn't possible is always a matter of the mind. It's always a matter of what we think is possible and what is not possible. It is all quite self-limiting. Now, setting aside absurd things like I can sit underwater for an hour, I can jump off a building and fly. Setting aside, the absurd extremes that people want to say where nothing is impossible. It really is to ask ourselves the question, well, what really is possible for me? And if we were to ponder that question deeply, we would discover our own litany, our long list of self-limitations, the things that we have decided are not possible for myself. And that, of course, is based on the idea that you hold of yourself. Now, when this idea got very popular, you can have it all, nothing is impossible to you. It's very interesting, the biblical quote is, nothing is impossible. With God, nothing is impossible. Not with the egoic mind. And I think it's really essential that we do draw a distinction between the ego mind and what one might refer to as the divine mind or the Buddha mind or pure mind, which is simply the nature of consciousness itself, the creative nature of consciousness itself. But look at it. Rather than debate it conceptually, take a look at it. What actually is mind all by itself? What remains if you take away all concepts, all ideas, all discursive thinking, all thought, all of our ideas about what's possible, what's not possible, what's good for me, what's not good for me? Cat hair everywhere. And what remains? There's most definitely something there. But it's non-conceptual. It's not something that you think about. Now, this is a very simple and direct meditation. And of course, the most direct meditation is the meditation where you are pondering deeply on what is actually here. Not conceptualizing about it, which means not putting labels on it, not giving it names, not trying to explain it, not trying to use any kind of logic or reason with it. Just the direct experience of what is here when everything else is taken away. And I mean everything is taken away, including all the seeking, including seeking for enlightenment. The ultimate quest that seekers get on, and it's a legitimate part of our experience. It has to happen. But what happens when even the seeking mind is set to the side? You enter this state which is known in Japanese Zen as shikantaza, or just sitting with no concepts, no ambition, no aspirations, no goal, just a profound sense of presence. And you can see here that this question of what is possible or not possible, it's not that it doesn't exist, it's that it is no longer conceptual. I'm no longer trying to find a criteria by which I can say, yes, this is possible, this isn't possible. This is true, this is not true. This is real, this is not real. Because in order to be able to say it's possible or impossible, to say it's true or not true, it's real or not real, one must touch the real and the true. Only the real and the true can say what is real and what is true. So is there any sense in you of not being there, of not getting it, of not being the Buddha, of not being the awakened one? You'll notice that that sense is conceptual. It's an idea, it's a concept. And there's two parts of that concept. There's the not enlightened part, or the don't get it part, and then there's the I part. The I remains usually unquestioned, but who is that I? When I'm saying I don't get it, or I'm not enlightened, or I'm on the path, but I'm not there yet, what is that I that we're referring to? Who is that? And if that is just another set of thoughts, another collection of ideas, another conceptual framework, well then set it to the side. Because that's all there is to the ego mind, is the sum total of all the thoughts of I that have been accumulated over the years, starting going all the way back to your parents, and even the use of the word I, which I find fascinating that little kids don't use the word I right away. They refer to themselves by name. The word I comes up much later. It's as if they're in a different space, kind of interacting with this creature via the name. It takes a while before that sense, just that sense of being and the sense of a personal I merge together, and the I becomes my name, becomes how I refer to myself. But now, setting all of that aside, what remains? This is the big question. This is the big question that should engage us just profoundly, prolifically. Because what else is there? You know, the Buddha was very clear, the Buddha being, in my estimation, the greatest teacher that ever lived. And if I have any skill when it comes to teaching, I've stolen it outright from him. And he said that the cause of all suffering is ignorance. Ignorance as to who you are. And at least in one tradition, his very last words he gave right before his nirvana, his death, he said, remember who you are. Do we think of ourselves as struggling? Do we think of ourselves as lacking? Well, those are just thoughts. Are they really true? And what evidence are you looking at that confirms to you that, yep, I'm limited. Yep, I'm struggling. I'm striving for awakening, but I'm not there yet. What if all of that is just conceptual noise, just thoughts? What happens when even that is set aside? What remains? No conceptual thought at all, negative or positive. I'm awakened, I'm not awakened. I'm there, I'm not there. I get it, I don't get it. Either side. There's still something here. There's still something very real, very much here. You could say it's the true I or the true mind, but even that's too much, isn't it? Even that misses the mark and pulls you back very subtly into the realm of conceptual thought. So what remains? It's just this quiet, this silence, presence, you, whatever that is, you're here. With no concept, no idea, no name, no form, no beginning, no end, just here. Just presence. Well, that was quite a distance from just being asked about what's possible. Hopefully that was of value to you all. So I will now open up the floor for questions. Hopefully I will have answers and comments about absolutely anything. And so I'll go back and just start going through the list here. Hello, Roberto. So good to see you. And Rosario, both of you guys from Madrid. Roberto, when you become aware of your wound, do not bother to heal it, because it will not. It will always accompany you all your life. Better, you need to thank all the other stuff that due to that wound you were able to develop. And he says, I don't even know how I dare to put that in here, but I realized the last few days. Thanks, GP. How beautiful. How beautiful. You know, it's not that our wounds don't heal, but they only heal when there is this total submission to what is. You know, it is impossible to get through human life without being wounded. The first of the Four Noble Truths is there is suffering. It is not possible to experience human life without experiencing suffering, without being wounded. If we can accept that deep in our hearts as a fact, and not try to ignorantly escape it, get away from it, we have created a completely different relationship with life, which opens us up to see, was it a wound? Was it an obstacle? Was it simply a redirection of my attention? Was this thing I called a wound the thing that precipitated my awakening? To whatever degree I have managed to awaken. But that state of mind in which you thank everything that came about as a result of that wound, everything you've learned to come to feel, the wisdom that you've gained, and most importantly, the patience, the compassion, the tenderness, the kindness, the kind of virtues that emerge when we completely embrace our woundedness. And when we completely embrace our woundedness, we've embraced the woundedness of absolutely everybody. Because there are no exceptions here. There is no out. There's no get out of suffering free card. Everybody experiences that wound. And now, what a difference that would make if we, every time you meet somebody, talk to somebody, whether it be somebody checking you out in the grocery store or somebody you just happen to strike up a conversation at the gas pump or something. What would it be like if you bore in your heart the fact that they were wounded and that they've learned to compensate, and maybe they've even learned from their wounds, maybe they've been deeply blessed, or maybe they're still in the struggle, thinking that somehow they have to get rid of this thing because it's messing up their lives. What would it be like if everyone you met, you brought that kind of spirit to? Indeed, what would the effect be? What will be the effect you had on yourself and everybody you meet? Think about it. You know, the path to enlightenment includes cultivated compassion. You cannot realize the truth without realizing that it's the truth of everyone. You cannot come face to face with your own ignorance without realizing that everybody is ignorant. You can't come deeply compassionate and understanding of your own wounds without realizing that this is the state of humanity. I don't care how successful they appear. I don't care how perfect their lives seem. There's no such thing as a life without suffering. It simply does not exist. Now, this isn't to say that suffering is eternal, because, my God, eternity would be hell if that were the case. But the cause of suffering is ignorance. And one of the first steps in undoing that ignorance is accepting suffering. Accepting, yes, this is the consequence of suffering. But because it's a consequence, suffering is the consequence of ignorance, of something else, then that means that suffering has a cause, and everything that has a cause has an end. Everything that has a beginning also has an ending. Every birth has a death. And if ignorance is the cause of suffering, then the end of ignorance is the end of suffering. And what is the fundamental ignorance? The fundamental ignorance is the ignorance as to who you are, as to who your true identity actually is. That is the cause of all suffering. The Buddha was really clear about that. Ignorance is the whole chain of causation that starts with ignorance and ends with old age and death. It all starts with ignorance. If you eradicate your ignorance, you have eradicated suffering. And in the process, you have embraced suffering. You've embraced this as the natural consequence. And so when suffering happens, you realize that it's waking you up. Were there no negative consequences to our ignorance, we would remain ignorant. Somebody might say, well, wouldn't that be better if we weren't suffering? But that's the point. You cannot avoid suffering as long as you're ignorant. And ignorance is simply the ignorance as to who you actually are. And who are you? Well, when I was talking about possibilities and got far afield from possibilities, you are what is left when everything else has been moved aside, taken away, set aside. Consciously, intelligently setting it aside. That is the nature of meditation. This is the nature of the Zazen, which is the samadhi that reveals simply your own presence and nothing else. That's who you are, the simple presence. This is what the Buddha realized, this is what Christ realized, this is what all the characters, the saints and sages through all time have realized. I am that. I am simply this presence that no concept can possibly capture. No name or form could possibly do it justice. None of these things can do you justice. So you become quite adept and quite disciplined and quite patient. You become vigilant at watching every time the word I comes up. What is it referring to? Is it referring back to this essence, this presence? Or is it referring to some person, some set of qualities? For the I, the ignorant I, the ego I, is nothing more than accumulated thoughts of the word I. Accumulated associations that we've made with ourselves, the presence, and the conditioning, the experiences, the memories, the associations, forming a concept I. But you're not a concept. You can set aside any concept. You can see through any concept. I don't even know how I dare put that here. Because you're a courageous man. Because when you see something and you recognize it to be true, you want to share it. This is part of the compassion. Somebody has the cure for cancer, they don't want to keep it to themselves. If somebody has the answer to suffering, they don't want to keep that to themselves. Buddha could have kept it to himself, but he didn't. For the next almost 50 years, he spoke non-stop. There's something like, 40 some odd thousand sutras, talks that the Buddha gave, which means, a couple times a day. That's like 1,000 a year. And 365 days, that's like 3 times a day. He's giving satsang. He's explaining, he's elaborating, he's compassionately sharing the answer to suffering. And to recognize that the answer to suffering is not conditional. We may think, and this is part of the ignorance, we think, well, what I need is, I need more money, or I need a better job, or I need more creative outlet, or I need a better relationship, or I need a relationship at all. There's nothing wrong with any of those things, but they're not the answer to suffering. They're not the remedy for suffering. And anything that we bring into our lives is going to bring in both a mixture of good and evil, both a mixture of beauty and ugliness, of difficulty and of ease. Because this is the nature of human life. When we accept that, as you have, in that statement, I'm not going to bother trying to heal it. It's because there's nothing really to heal. Because there's nothing wrong with me. Ultimately, you come to see that that presence, has never been wounded. It's never been touched by any of this. So I often refer to it as the original innocence. It's simply not been, it can't be tainted. How do you taint space? Take the ugliest color paint, and can you paint space? The presence I refer to is like space. It's why pure mind, pure consciousness has forever been referred to as space-like. Nothing attaches to it. Okay. If I move my hand from here to here, the space doesn't have to get out of the way in order to make room for my hand. It moves, it permeates, it moves. This is space congealed. In fact, that's how science actually looks at it right now. There's no matter at all. There's no particles. There's nothing. There's fields of vibration. Self-excited fields of existence. And you can think of consciousness, pure mind, as being just this field that is internally causing its own vibration to take place. And that's what we see as the spontaneous creation of the universe, which is a spontaneous creation. It wasn't a point in time. It's constantly happening. Anyway, I'm digressing. I'm going off. I will bring this particular one to a close and see if there are any other questions. So, thank you for that, Roberto. It's just It really touches my heart to hear you say that. Deeply, deeply, deeply. Hello, Ava. My good friend Ava and Mary. Hello to Mary and David and Elaine and Ken Show. What a great name. In BC, Canada. There's Paula. Hello, Paula. Evening to you as well. Evening, which means I think you're in Europe, if I don't miss my guess. There's Carl. Hi, everyone from Ireland. Hello, Carl. There's John Lucas in Portland, my neighbor. Mary Sykes. Great introduction, G. I see how I get caught again and again after I let go with the thought that I still need some authority other than myself to just be. And let me just be. Again, that is a belief that is a strong pull to me. Pull to keep me separated. That's very, very true. That's very, very true. It is a deeply held belief. And when I speak of deeply held beliefs, I'm not talking about simply mind beliefs. A belief is not something visible. Unlike one luminary who says a belief is just a thought you keep thinking, it's not really true. A belief is an invisible influence that shapes thoughts. It's kind of like, you've probably seen where they have, demonstrating magnetism. They'll have like a white sheet of paper, and on top of the paper are metal filings, iron filings, right? Like little dust things. And you hold a magnet up to the bottom of it. Now you can't see the magnet, of course, right? It's invisible, but as it gets closer to the paper, everything gloms around to the magnet until you see the shape of the magnet outlined in the iron filings that are on top of the paper. You don't see the magnet. In fact, a belief is like that. It's like the magnet you never see, but it's this invisible influence, this invisible force that pulls thoughts together. Now, how you discern the belief is by looking at the thoughts. When I say this is really kind of a twofold path. To set aside thinking is all thinking is just conceptual and can never tell you the truth, opens you up to the pure state of being, which is pure presence. From there, everything that comes up can be questioned. By what authority are you claiming that this is true? Well, the authority is going to be some kind of invisible hidden belief, something that's buried down in there and in the unconscious, in programming and conditioning and meaning and stuff that's just accumulated over the years. And so it seems as if it's very, very strong until you see it. But yes, it's almost hypnotic. Suddenly you'll find yourself back in the thick of it, right? up to your eyeballs in the swamp once again. Remember, there's no definitive aha moment. It's a constant retraining of yourself to remain present, to remain conscious, to remain vigilant. But not so that you have an ever-increasing frequency and duration of peak experiences. It's so much more subtle and so much more gentle. It is just, there it is again. There it is arising again. There it is arising again. The act of seeing it arise is the act of being awake. And that's all there is to being the Buddha. Remember, the Buddha is simply the awakened one who sees things as they are. Which means you don't have to make these things go away. Right? The wound doesn't have to heal, as Roberto put it. Nothing has to go away. Nothing has to be gotten rid of. It just needs to be seen for what it actually is. An arising of old patterns of thought and conditioning and programs and the like, and nothing more. and you remain aloof from it. You remain the presence, the mind that if you weren't there, it couldn't possibly be there, could it? So even the arising of these old patterns of stuff are a confirmation that you are here and that you are the pure consciousness. Because without you, none of it could happen at all. Nothing could exist without you, could it? Now this is such a profound thing to ponder, because there's a belief that there's all this stuff out there, and if I die tomorrow, it's all still going to be here, be there, and I'm going to pass in and out of it. Maybe I'll get another life, maybe I won't. Who knows? Maybe it's all over. Maybe there's another dimension or something like that. Just put all of that to the side and look at what you're actually experiencing. Without you, can anything exist at all? Anything. To you. Now you can say, well, there's other people out there and they're having an experience. You know what? Even set that aside, because how do you know? You have dreams every night and you have conversations with people and have fun with people and do things. You know, you see mountains and cities and animals and all sorts of things, and none of them are actually there. They're all you. Now you don't have to go, oh, so everyone I meet is me. Don't conceptualize it. Just look at what you can actually verify for yourself, and that is, without me, I'm not having any experience at all. So even the arising of what appears to be old programs and conditioned responses can't happen without me. So who am I? Allow that to take your attention and bring it back to the big question, was, well then, what am I? What is it that if I'm not here, none of this is taking place? Well then, what am I? What is it that I am? What is it that's actually here? What is the I behind the I? The I that's there even without the word I, prior to I, prior to anything else, which everything else is dependent upon. This becomes our meditation. This becomes the deep contemplation, to find the answer to that question. And where can you find the answer to that question of what's here if I'm not, except in you? You can't find it anywhere out there, because you don't even know anything is out there. There is no answer. This is what it means to turn within, to look within yourself, to look to yourself. What is this self that knows nothing outside of itself? I have ideas. These are just ideas of things out there. Is there anything out there? I don't know. But me, do I know me? Well, I know that I am. Wow, that's a great start. I am, which is one of the names for God. Anyway, I'm going off in all sorts of different directions today. Drop the idea that it has a strong pull. So what is this it that has a strong pull? Is it something other than your thought or your concept or your idea about it? Is there an it that has a strong pull keeping you separate? Is there an external, objectively existing it exerting an influence on you? It's a deep pondering. Or is it just a belief in an external force that is pulling you, which means it's completely happening within your own mind. It is completely within mind. guess I'll leave it at that. Hari Om to you, Jay. Hello, mystic poet, my chic. Faith from the north of France. Carl, hi GP. When you can connect to your true self, do human emotions fade away? I'm finding difficult to take most of my emotions seriously lately, and sometimes other people's too. It feels heartless. Well, you connect to your true self. Do your emotions go away? The answer is no. You're saying, I'm just finding it difficult to take them seriously. Well, that's true. And to take other people's emotions seriously as well. Now, what do we do then? Well, we can either ridicule other people's emotions, or we can have compassion towards them. We can remember every bit of suffering you've ever experienced, or any suffering you're having right now. We don't have to take emotions seriously. That is, we don't have to regard them as an absolute statement of truth. They're not the truth. They're just emotions. They're things that arise and fall, arise and fall, arise and subside, like thoughts. They're just a flow of feelings that go. And so you don't want to take them seriously. You don't want to make a big deal out of them, because they're going to come and then they're going to go. Sadness will come, be followed by happiness, which is followed by sadness, which is followed by happiness. This is just the cycle of life. This is what happens. If you realize that that's the case, you can regard other people's emotions in the same way. Now, you can either regard those people as like, see, you're making a big deal out of this. This is really stupid, which some people on the spiritual path mistakenly do, or you can regard everyone with enormous compassion, with tenderness, recognizing that in ignorance, they're going to feel as if their emotions they do take them seriously, and they're struggling desperately to get rid of the negative emotions and get more of the positive emotions. And since we've all been caught in that trap, and still continue to get caught in that trap, we can have enormous compassion to the others, to our fellow beings who are also caught in that trap. So when you say, I don't take my emotions seriously, I believe what you mean is that you don't give them the weight, the importance, the significance that you once did. But now you're going to be surrounded by lots of people who do give them the significance and importance and the weight that you used to. So how do you deal with them? What's the right way? What is the right relationship with people like that? Well, it's obvious. It's compassion. It's tenderness. And a willingness to simply keep yourself open, looking for the opportunity, the little open window wherein you might be able to interject something that will move the needle for them and bring them closer to the place where they don't take them so seriously anymore. When they have become open to the possibility for awakening from suffering. So, does it really feel heartless? Or is there just a distance there right now? I mean, do you really feel heartless? Because if you did feel heartless, you wouldn't have asked me this question. You would have just been arrogant. You've been, I don't take my emotions so seriously, and they do, stupid people. But you don't feel heartless. You're asking the question because you don't want to just be dismissive or indifferent towards the suffering of others. And anybody who has touched their own suffering and maybe still experiencing suffering, that's a heart that has been broken open. And it's not going to be heartless. It's going to be heartful. Does that answer it for you, Carl? Jay, how do you know what resistance looks like? For example, in the case of sleep, sometimes I don't know whether I feel really sleepy or my mind is calming down and the sleep comes from the energy levels dropping. And if that's the case, what would I do for that? There's a qualitative difference between a drowsiness that comes from resistance and a drowsiness that is simply the body's tired and it needs to sleep. And I think you can tell the difference between the two. Now that doesn't mean that sometimes you're going to succumb to the resistance of the resistance drowsiness and fall asleep like during meditation. I even have a Zen master friend of mine who, after 30 years of meditation, found himself falling asleep during meditation. And he said, I did everything I possibly could to keep awake until finally he said, fuck it, I'm just going to surrender to it. And the moment he surrendered to it, he didn't fall asleep anymore. The resistance was there, but resistance, remember, you have to pick up and embody that resistance. So if you start fighting the drowsiness, you're actually embodying the resistance to the resistance. It sounds, I don't know, it sounds kind of arcane, but that's all you can say. Oh, there's resistance, right. It's resisting to going to this deep of a profound inquiry. Yeah, there's going to be resistance to that because it challenges everything you know about yourself. And so, can you tell the difference between when your body is actually tired and you need to sleep, your mind is just calming down, and the energy levels have dropped because they rise and fall during the day. What is the circadian rhythms that we all have, right? In fact, men and women are different. They have very, very different cycles as to how that operates. And then when it is actually resistance. I'm getting really drowsy because there's something I don't want to do. I'm getting drowsy because I'm sitting down to meditate, and the resistance can take the form of drowsiness. It can also take the form of an incredibly active mind. All of a sudden, you can't hold your attention still for even a split second. Now, what do you do with that? Well, you take a step back and go, well, there it is. There's the mind doing its thing. And I don't have to do anything about it. I don't have to fix it. I don't have to change it. I don't have to become non-resistant. The presence at the middle of this is not resistant, nor is it sleepy, because it's aware of the entire thing. I'm aware of the drowsiness. I'm aware of this. I'm aware of the differing levels of energy. I'm aware of them as natural cycles, and I'm also aware of them when it's not so natural, where it's just resistance trying to stop me from doing something. And it's always, remember, there's no devil here. There's no enemy here. There's nobody here that's trying to mess you up. You're just dealing with the safety mechanism of the nervous system and how it just always wants to resist any kind of change. Anything that upsets the apple cart, it's a guinnit. I'm not voting for that. I don't want that. Thank you very much. So, does that answer it for you, Jay? If not, I know you'll tell me. Mystic Poet, how to pray in a non-dual way. I love the idea of talking, asking God, even if there's a romantic taste of that for me. Also, I want to hear your thoughts about devotion. Well, there's nothing wrong with asking God. Because the actual God is not dependent upon your concept of him, her, it, nor is it dependent upon the name you give it. If you are praying with an open heart and a loving heart and a compassionate heart towards yourself and others, those prayers are heard by the real God, which is simply the consciousness, the very same consciousness that is asking and talking to God is also God, which is why God always hears our prayers because God's making the prayer. both the mouth that speaks and the ear that hears and the heart that answers are all the one beingness, the one God, the one presence. And yes, there is a beautiful, romantic, sentimental, I refer to it as the religious sentiment, and I wish there was more of it in non-dual circles, because non-duality can become very, very cold, very clinical, very conceptual. And it misses the whole aspect of just the end of suffering and just the plight of the ordinary human being, which the Buddha was very clear that the ordinary human being is the Buddha. You cannot separate them. You can't take a Buddha or a God or a Christ and put them out here. Even Paul said, "Don't you know that Christ is within you?" And in the first chapter of John, he says that the Word, everything was created through the Word, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. But the actual word dwelt among us in Greek actually means within. So the Word became flesh and dwelt within us. So the very heart that is asking God is God. And so our devotion then becomes devoted to what? Anybody who is going to attain Buddhahood is going to attain it through devotion. When I was a musician, I was devoted to music. That was what I was devoted to. You cannot become a great musician or a great artist or a great writer or a great father without being devoted to it. Everything requires your devotion. Devotion is orders of magnitude bigger than discipline or commitment, because it's commitment with love. It's like being in love. I was devoted to music, but I didn't have to use discipline to practice. I just loved it so much I practiced, and so there was a devotion that was driven by love. And so, enjoy your Islamic heritage, which is extremely devotional, which has this beautiful romantic sense of Allah and the closeness of Allah. As I think the Quran even begins, he says, "There is no God, there is only God." Yes, there isn't a God and a people. There is only God. And this is the ultimate of devotion, when our devotion merges with the object of its devotion, with the object of its love, until there's no longer two. And isn't that what love is all about? Isn't that when we fall in love with somebody, isn't that just that desire to be one, to get so close, to enter into each other's bodies, like to be one being? Isn't that the ultimate of love, even as we experience it humanly, as loving human beings? So by all means, pray to a God that you love, and let yourself little by little become aware of the fact that that even your prayer is coming from that God. Thank you, Faith. Love you so much. Janet, what if the body identifies with the energies from suffering, struggle, and physical symptoms? What if the body identifies with the energies from suffering, struggle, and physical symptoms appear? Well, it is never the body that identifies. It is only the mind which can identify. The body is simply the body. It is simply a functioning. It is not self-aware. It is not sentient. It is simply the functioning of life. And so when life is being the suffering is being experienced, we have a choice. We can identify with the suffering, right? In one of two ways. We can become the victim, oh, woe is me, of the suffering, or we can become Joan of Arc. We can become we're going to fight this, right? The war against whatever the illness is, right? I'm gonna fight my disease. Both of which create the struggle. One is attached to it, the other is averse to it. The middle way, of course, is neither attached nor averse. There's the simple, humble recognition that there is suffering, and that the cause of suffering is my own ignorance. And what is the ignorance? Well, one ignorance is the notion that it's the body that somehow is identifying with suffering. The body cannot identify with anything. Only mind can. So if it's only mind, then it's only me, because I am that mind. And so there's a habit of struggling. There's a habit of identification with, an attachment to, or an aversion to suffering, the symptoms that are presenting themselves. And then there's a fear of those symptoms appearing. How do I get rid of these symptoms? Let them appear. Let them be there. Because if it is a symptom, right, a symptom is not a cause. It has a cause. So, there's a symptom. What is its cause? And on one level you can say, the cause of this is, a bad diet, or I had an accident, or things like that. But you can keep going. Because all suffering, the origin and cause of all suffering is ignorance. The ignorance that somehow I am not producing the very experience that I feel is oppressing me. Somehow I am doing that. Now, when you see that, oftentimes you go, oh my God, I'm doing this to myself, and you can start beating yourself up about it. Or you can just say, okay, if I'm making this, then I can unmake it. If this is the cause, then there's an end. So now your inquiry becomes much deeper. Because what is the source of these physical symptoms? Now, in the meantime, I have no problem using various kinds of techniques in order to ease the symptoms. Whether that be some kind of medication, whether it be tapping, whether it be EMDR, whether it be massage therapy, it doesn't really matter. There's nothing that says you have to endure those symptoms. But if you realize that a symptom is a symptom, and the relief of a symptom is not the cure for the underlying illness, then your quest to find the underlying cause will only be supported by the idea that there's a reduction in the symptoms. You won't look to that as the solution. You won't look to that as the goal. The goal is to find the cause, which is the end of all suffering. And in the process, you're going to find that even before the physical symptoms themselves are abated, that the suffering from them will begin to abate. Because the psychological suffering, which is resistance, is going to ease. It's going to come down. And what will be left is simply the condition itself. And now you can look at the condition itself from this place that is not steeped in the suffering, because the suffering is resistance to it, and I want to get rid of it, and how can I get rid of it as soon as I can, and et cetera, et cetera. The whole picture gets much more holistic and much more open. Does that help, Janet? Am I making sense of all that? Thank you for that question. Dale, hey GP, where are you? These been away from. Well, right this second, I am. I was in Canada. I rented a place in the middle of nowhere for about a month. I'm back in Seattle. I'm spending 2 weeks at some friend's house doing cat sitting. taking care of business in their place while they are on vacation in Florence. And starting in next Sunday, I'm going into my new apartment, which is in right by Seattle. Yeah, it's not in Seattle proper, but it's right on the borderline with Seattle. So that's where I am now. And I'm looking forward to my new place. It has a beautiful view out the window. You will all see it because it's going to be the backdrop for all of my classes in Tea with G for the foreseeable future. So hope you all enjoy it when you get to see it. I'm sure you will. Mary, I always feel like I'm falling into such loving hands as I listen to you, GP. Thank you so much. My heart is happy to be here with you. Lovely, lovely. The same to you, my dear. Same to you. Kensho, lately I'm becoming much more aware of my past actions, behaviors, and how I've treated others. Guilt becomes so heavy. It's so difficult to make space for it and be with it, and my immediate reaction is to panic and ignore the thoughts. Slowly but surely I remind myself that everything passes and this shall pass too. GP, am I handling this in the right way? Yeah, you are. Something inside of you has awoken. And I'll tell you, one of the most difficult things for us to face, although it's not, and because it is difficult, it's usually not the first thing that we face. Often the first thing we face is all the ways in which we ourselves have been abused and hurt and ignored, neglected, especially in childhood. But then, little by little, as we mature, we become aware of what we've done to others. That we too have been guilty of hurting others, of demeaning them, belittling them, making them feel small, maybe lying, stealing, who knows, right? And we've all been guilty of it in one form or another. And if not this life, a past life. We've all been Hitlers, and we've all been Gandhis. We have all had the experience running the gamut of cruelty and kindness. In the awakening, we begin to see it for what it really is, which is ignorance. And oftentimes, when we recognize how we have treated others, the guilt, the shame can indeed become very, very heavy, and it becomes difficult to endure it. There are times, even for me, where suddenly a memory will come up and, oh boy, and I facepalm myself, oh dear, yes, that really did happen, and thank you for revealing this to me. Because it gets revealed when we're ready to face it, when we're ready to handle it, when we're ready to finally let go of the guilt about it. This is what it means to come to genuine forgiveness. And a genuine forgiveness is recognizing your own innocence. Had you known better, had you known then what you know now, you would not have done anything that you'd now have to be regretting and feeling guilty about. It is always a result of our ignorance. And if that's the case, what's the way out of guilt? What's the way out of shame? To see through our ignorance and to be ignorant no more. In my ignorance, I can hurt others, not in my wisdom, because wisdom is inherently compassionate. So is it difficult to make space for it? It can be. It can be. Yes, it's going to shudder a bit, but if you're even attempting to make space for it, if you're even attempting, okay, let it in, and let it have a healing effect on me. As Roberto so beautifully put, I've been wounded and I'm not It's useless to try to get rid of the wound. And I've wounded others, and so it's useless to try to get rid of that wound. The panic will arise. The shame will arise. And what is the panic? To be exposed to the world that you're not this good, wonderful, pure, loving person that you've represented yourself to be. That's where the panic comes. That's where we're afraid of being exposed. Oh my God, I'm not this virtuous, saintly character that I've led everyone to believe. Oh my God, I'm not that. And you're right, you're not. And in that recognition, you become that. So now it's no longer affected. It's no longer I'm pretending to be good, when underneath is all sorts of stuff that I deeply, deeply regret. Now it's right there. It's right in front of me. And what do you do with that? Well, the best thing to do, become humble. Recognize, my God, I have hurt others. So should I complain when somebody hurts me? No. Matter of fact, if somebody does hurt me, it's because at some point in this life or another, I've hurt somebody else in a very similar way. This is kind of poetic justice, you might say, which means that your life makes sense. So you can drop being a victim because we brought it all on ourselves. And little by little we can let go of the guilt, because the guilt can't stand, it cannot stay, it cannot persist in the awakened mind. But the awakened mind is humble. The mind, as it is awakening, prior to the big awakening where it all falls away, the ultimate Buddhahood where it all just disappears as one fabulous dream, the awakening mind becomes quite malleable, quite open, quite heart-based. The heart and the mind come together so that the self-compassion and other compassion merge. That we can't get offended anymore. If everything that's ever happened to me is a reflection of what I and myself have done in some way, I can't get offended anymore, can I? I can't look at somebody who's doing something horrible in the world and condemn them. I can understand them. I can try to stop them. I can do everything I can to protect the innocent, but not hold offense, not impute guilt to them, not be anything other than compassionately kind. This is the great fruit that comes from the guilt that is so heavy it feels like I can't bear it. But you can, because it is just temporary. It is going to go. It too is going to pass, just as you say. Everything is going to pass. But we don't want it to just pass away. We don't want it to pass until it's done the job, until it has purified the ground into which it has been planted. Then I'll let it pass. I want the suffering to create the transformation in me that I need so that there is no more suffering. I want the guilt to create the transformation so there's no more guilt, nor any need to be guilty, nor any imputing of guilt to anyone else. Forgive them, Father, they do not know what they are doing. What a powerful statement to be able to come right from your heart and be able to say that. Does that answer it for you, Kensho? I love that name. Kensho is an awakening experience, an enlightenment experience. That's in the Japanese Zen, the experience of Kensho. Hello, GP. Hello, my Spanish friends. One's no Spanish, no Irish, no Danish. One. Hi, Hassan. 111. Yes. Spanish flavor, Irish flavor, Danish flavor, but no Spanish, no Irish, no Danish, no Danish. Except I love Danish and I love Spanish food. Can have the flavor, but no identity. I love it. Paula, well spotted, GP. Yes, I'm in England and it's now 19:30. 7:30 in the evening. GP, I would like to one time join your site and ask the questions directly live. Don't quite know how to do that with this. I do have some other. I am planning on doing a retreat, which would be on Zoom, sometime in the next couple of months, I think. It'll be 2 or 3 days. I'm not sure which, but it'll just be like a Saturday morning and a Sunday morning. Probably in about 2 months. In which case, I will be interacting with people directly. So I appreciate that. Yes, I'd love to work with you one-on-one. I would love that. Jay, I guess the suffering comes from the intense energy these emotions have in the body. No. The suffering comes from our reaction to the intense energy. The energy itself cannot create suffering. Suffering is always a reaction. It's always a reaction to the emotions by saying, I don't want that. It's an aversion to these emotions rather than an attachment, and the aversion is where the suffering is. If there's no aversion, if the emotion can just come no matter how intense it is, well then there's no suffering. There's always that subtle wanting for it to go away. Yes. I mean, who doesn't want the feeling of who doesn't want the feeling of calm? Nobody. Yep, everybody wants that feeling of calm, right? And we think that if I can just make these feelings go away, then I will have the calm. And therein lies the ignorance. Therein lies the mistake. The calm is not something that plays back and forth between distress. There's distress and there's calm. It's not the opposite of distress. Calm, silence, presence are what are always here. That is the natural state of yourself. In the very beginning, when I guide us into that place where all thought is gone, you're not paying attention to the thought, the emotions, the sensations, none of that. There is just no conceptualizing going on. There is just presence. Notice how calm that is. But now that calm is not a feeling. It's not an emotional state. And this is the mistake people make. They're looking for the emotional state of calm, which is simply the absence of distress. The reality of calm is the background against which both the feeling of distress and the feeling of calm can vacillate. So what we're really seeking isn't just the feeling of calm, but it is the truth of calmness. It is the truth of silence. It is the reality of the nature of our own being, which is always in what we would call calmness, stillness, utter presence, unmovable, irreducible, indestructible. This is your true nature. Hassan says, same here, Jay. Suppressing them, distracting myself. Yeah, and don't beat yourself up for that, guys. It's perfectly natural. This is what we do. We wanted to distract ourselves. We wanted to keep our attention away from it until we can't. And that's the beauty of grace, the beauty of life. It will guarantee that at some point you can't. that you can't push it away any longer. And it inspires within you the spiritual altitude and the spiritual aspiration that I don't want to feel like I want to push it away. I want to be able to submit to it. I want to be able to calmly be present in the midst of no matter what is going on. That's a high, high, high aspiration. But just having that aspiration doesn't make it happen. Having that aspiration inspires us to consistently notice when we fail at it. Oh my God, I was totally taken away. All I wanted to do was get rid of this. Please take this away. It's like Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. If it's possible for this cup to be taken from me, please take it. And just like Christ, we have to submit, not my will, but thine be done. This is what's come up for me right now. Therefore, this is my practice. What's your practice? Is it vipassana? Is it insight meditation? Is it presence? Is it allowing? No. It's this. It's this. This moment is making its demand on me. This is my practice. And if I can sit like the Buddha in the presence of that, just as it is, and not move, and not budge, well, then I am the Buddha. Then I am the practicing. Then I am living and embodying my practice. Because the ultimate practice, the ultimate koan, is your life. Every event of your life is your practice. It's not just with your butt sitting on the cushion. Or in the Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. All of that's wonderful. All of that is part of it. But your life, just as it is, your human, everyday experience is your practice. That's the deeper meaning of Zen. That is the Zen of life. Life itself is the practice. Life itself is the koan. The mystery of your own existence. Just think about it for a moment. The mystery of your own existence. Marco Badla, you are the goat. Thank you, Marco. Profound pondering indeed, says Lisa. There's Lisa. Hello, Lisa. San says, it's like if I feel those emotions, an explosion will happen. For years I struggled with those emotions since my childhood. GP, you can't conceptualize it. No, you can't. They're just so... The struggle is trying to get rid of that which you can't get rid of. You cannot escape emotions, otherwise you wouldn't be alive. And we don't want to, do we? I mean, life is felt. It's not thought. We're not just thinking about life, right? We're feeling it. Life is felt. And we learned, we got trained early on, since your childhood, that certain emotions should be felt, certain ones shouldn't be. And depending on your culture, that can be pretty extreme. Nope, you shouldn't feel that. So when you do, what happens? You're in conflict with your own feelings. I mean, what's worse? I mean, that really is hell, to be in conflict with your own thoughts and feelings. Instead of totally accepting, well, these are the thoughts, these are the feelings. They're raw emotions, and yeah, they're raw. They're tender, right? You don't touch that, don't touch that. It hurts, it hurts. I remember when I broke my shoulder, the tiniest little bump getting in the subway in New York City. Oh, good Lord. It was so tender, it was so tender. What do? You let out the yelp and then you sit down or hold on to the strap. What else are you going to do? You ride the subway. I couldn't avoid it. I needed to take it. So Yeah, we struggle with the emotions only because we don't want them to be there. We think that somehow the spiritual ideal is that all of these emotions are going to go away. They're not. They are the practice. They are your invitation to Zen. Hassan, as I listen to Rupert Spira, there are two ways, tantric and Vedantic, to deal with emotions. Yes, I agree with that very much. There's an inward path and an outward path. There's the path of self-inquiry, and then there's the path of embodiment. And you can't separate the two. And in fact, if you listen to a true Vedantic teacher, they'll tell you exactly the same thing. That the Vedantic is one part of it. They don't use the term tantric as the other part of it, but there's the inward and the outward, and they're both absolutely necessary. This is the same as the Buddha said. It's the middle way. It is neither this nor that nor both nor neither. It is deep inquiry and deep humanity. You cannot separate the two. When you try to separate them, obviously you're creating a fictitious duality. There is no duality between the human and the divine. They are not two. And hello, Karen. So good to see you. And Corinne, hello. So good to see everybody. Oh, so wonderful to see everybody. How are we doing on time? Oh, not bad, not bad. There's Marty. Hello, Marty. Good to see you. This question of dealing with emotions, right? Even the word, I got to deal with my emotions. You definitely would not want to have life without emotions. You'd be a robot. You'd be AI. You wouldn't be human. The problem isn't the emotions, it's the problem that we want to pick and choose. Thank you, I'll have that emotion, but oh, not you, no. But yeah, these over here, yeah, you, and you, good, you can come in. The rest of you, you wait outside. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way because of, the whole yin-yang thing. You're bringing in the good side, you're also bringing its negation. You're bringing in the light, you're bringing in the dark, because you can't have one without the other. It's dependent arising. Everything is interdependent upon everything else. And so you're going to eat the whole enchilada, and there's nothing you can do about that. So, Jay, I keep hearing that the acceptance of what is happening now will get easier over time with practice, but I want already know what that will look like with the laughing face. Yeah, it does get easier over time, but don't think that time needs to be a short time. It can take a long time. It could take lifetimes. You're on the path. That's it. Don't worry about anything else. You're on the path. Don't keep checking your watch. Don't set a timer. Are we there yet? Don't be like the little kid in the back seat of the car. Are we there yet? No. Think of yourself as, I once saw a joke of these, there was a mom and a dad, and they were all on camels going through the desert, and there's a mom and a dad on their camels, and there are three little kids, and one of the little kids in the back going, are we there yet? And he's saying, we're Bedouins, we never get there. That's the best way to regard it. It's just here. It's just now. What do I do with this moment? That's it. That's the whole practice. The moment I go into the future and I start checking my watch again, I say, are we there yet? Am I enlightened yet? How am I going to know? The moment I start doing that, shoop, I'm no longer here anymore, am I? I'm no longer practicing. I'm thinking about practice instead of actually practicing. I'm thinking about playing the piano instead of sitting and playing the piano. When do you play the piano? In the future? Nope, you play it right now. or you're not playing it. This is what it means to truly be dedicated to your practice. For your life to be your practice. Hassan says if you have a trauma, GP calls it soul disconnect. It'd be more difficult for you. It is yes, the trauma is a soul disconnect. You have been disconnected from a part of you, and it is difficult because the entire nervous system now is arrayed in such a way to keep you from having to feel that. It wants to keep you from having to relive it. And so it has, a trauma derives from the Greek word. It's a Greek word, which means wound. And you can think of it as something that, I've got a wound. I did, a stupid thing that like a 9 or 10-year-old boy would do at the swimming pool, and I took a big gouge out of the front of my leg. And it was such a big gouge, it couldn't really heal back over, so it formed scar tissue. And scar tissue has no nerves in it. You can't feel anything. So to this day, I can touch it, and I can't feel anything. I could put a flame up to it, and I wouldn't feel it. This is what a trauma is. It's a wound that gets layered over with scar tissue, so that there's a part of us we just can't feel. We're afraid to feel it. It's being protected. Right. Now, the big difference between a physical wound and the emotional wound is we can, in fact, heal it. We can bring it back to life. But that's what you're dealing with. So when it is traumatic material, you're going to find it more difficult to get to the root of it. Not because it's any more true, but because there's just more and more of what the nervous system has done in order to protect you from having that experience ever again. Which is supremely kind, right? And so the only way that space can be opened up, and the only way that scar tissue can be removed, which of course exposes that original wound, is through just an enormous amount of unconditional love, which creates a safe environment, because when it's safe, then the scar tissue can be removed, because it won't get hurt again. M. Jane Bell. Hi, GP. Please talk about shame. Not related to an action I've done, just a deep feeling of something awful and unacceptable about me. It's the linchpin holding my struggle and pain in place. Yeah. It really always deeply touches my heart, because I've wrestled with that for over the years. And of course, it isn't related to anything you've actually done. It's completely related to how you were treated as a child. Now, and it is traumatic. It is the result of deep traumatic wounds. When you're a child, you are helpless. You are completely and totally vulnerable. Your entire life is in the hands of others. And your experience of life, the image you form of yourself and the world around you, is going to be completely driven by how you are treated. Now, the thing is that when the child is mistreated, as most of us, if not all of us, have been, I think we've all been mistreated ever since agriculture started the formation of city-states, and we stopped being hunter-gatherers and lost touch with nature. We've all been mistreated ever since, and now these days it's the worst it's ever been. So when you are mistreated, the child, remember, first off, for millions of years, when you look at the evolution of the body that became a human being, that allowed for consciousness to have this level of self-inquiry, it was completely in harmony with nature. there are letters that have been written by the European settlers of the United States, talking about how just appalled they were at how the Native Americans didn't beat their children, they didn't yell at them. When they cried, they picked them up, they coddled them, they loved them to death, and the Europeans were just utterly offended by this. They thought this was the most horrible thing in the world. Spare the rod, spoil the child, kind of thing. So you can see the difference in which how the whole human body evolved, so that when a child is born, it completely expects to be embraced, loved, taken care of, every need met, and gradually be weaned into self-sufficiency. So when that doesn't happen, you're talking about an existential crisis, because the human body has no way to deal with it. It just locks itself down. And so what happens is the child has no choice but to blame itself. So when you blame yourself, what does that mean? It means that if I was enough, if I was lovable enough, or smart enough, or whatever the enoughness was, then they would have loved me. The child cannot impute guilt. They can't impute the reality, which is the incapacity of the parents or the caregivers, and not the fault of the child. We can't, so we take that on ourselves. And what happens? Out of that feeling develops a sense of identity. Out of this sense that I am not enough develops a sense of identity, and little by little it solidifies into what we would call toxic shame. Obviously, it's not anything I did. If there was something I did, well, I could redo it, but I tried. I tried doing everything. I tried being everything my parents wanted me to be, but I couldn't. But I simply was not enough. It becomes existential shame. I am not enough, period. Not that I didn't try enough, not that I couldn't be it if I learned the right thing, or I said the right things, or I became the right things. You cannot become the right thing. You cannot possibly meet this. And so you acquire this toxic shame. That's the feeling that you're feeling. And it's one of those things that I use EFT on a great deal, because it helps open up the body to this simple possibility. And it's a question you can ask yourself right now. You can pose it deep into your heart, which is simply this: what if it wasn't your fault? What if none of this was your fault? What if it was them? That there never was anything wrong with you? That you were completely acceptable, just not to them? Those questions, and I always put them in the form of a question, because the nervous system is just too damn smart and too well defended to receive this as an affirmation. Plus the mind's got its checklist for any affirmation to get past before it even gets near the body. But if you simply ask the question, what if? Maybe it's not true. Maybe it is all my fault. Maybe I should be ashamed. Maybe I really am not enough. But what if it's not true? We never, you see, to the shamed heart, the shamed mind, we don't ask that question. We just assume that it was my fault. The whole body-mind mechanism is laboring under the assumption that it was my fault. And as an adult, I've only got two options. I've got to try to prove myself, or I've got to hide really, really well. But however you look at it, my whole adult life is trying to compensate for this underlying assumption that I'm not enough. What if it's not true? What if you were simply not enough for them because they weren't capable of it? They simply couldn't love you. They couldn't see you. They couldn't appreciate you. They could not meet your needs. They could not teach you how to self-regulate, how to self-appreciate, how to self-validate. They couldn't do it because they probably didn't know how to do it themselves, because it happened to them and it happened to their parents, and this has been going on for generations. What if it's not true? What if you are enough? It's just such a potent question to put it in the form of a question. How's that feeling, Jane Bell? M. Jane Bell? Can I just call you Jane? How does that feel? Everybody. We all have this sense of struggle. We all have this. I don't know anybody raised, at least in the Western culture of which I'm familiar with, who does not have this. Not a soul. It's the way the culture itself has evolved over time into this position. This isn't universally true. It's not true in what we would call primitive cultures. I just call them non-technological cultures, in which ways they're far less primitive than we are. They're way beyond, as a matter of fact, in simply acknowledging human nature and recognize it, but we're not. So we end up with circumstances like this. I know that was my case. Enormous feelings of shame, and it still pops up. Suddenly something will pop up and I'll be, oh, wait a minute, there it is again. Wow. It's a thing that runs deep because I wasn't acceptable. I wasn't loved. I wasn't taken care of. That was the reality that I experienced, and the child has no choice but to internalize that, because the last thing you can do is impute guilt to your caregivers, because if you see that they are in fact lacking, your whole life falls apart. So you simply don't impute it. It's you. It's all my fault. It's all my doing. What if it isn't? What if it never was? Again, I will use EFT when I'm asking these questions to help the nervous system calm down enough to be able to even take it in as a possibility. Notice I'm not asserting it. I'm not affirming it. Like, see, this is true, because it'll deny it in a split second. But, if somebody comes in and makes a bold assertion on you, you're gonna rankle a bit. You're gonna pull away. But if somebody comes and says, "Well, what do you think about this? Let's look at a different point of view. What do you think?" And at first, it may be just rejected out of hand. Can't possibly be true. But yeah, well, what if it is? I mean, you haven't been totally, you got a date or something at somewhere along the line. You got a job. There have been times when you actually have been enough. So it's not completely true, right? Now suddenly there's an opening to some alternative evidence that, well, maybe it's not totally true. Mostly. But maybe there's a little window in there that says, well, maybe it's not as true as I thought it was. And suddenly now you're having an internal dialogue. You're having an internal conversation. You're having a very loving kind of self-inquiry. It's got to be a very compassionate self-inquiry, which is the compassion, the human side of non-duality. Hassan, GP, why can't we join and ask you the questions directly? God, the Supreme Being. It's just the choice I made in this particular format. I have other formats where I can do that, but in this format, I just leave it like so. So there's a little bit of technology involved in it, which I do have, but you can kind of get it. How can we attain true peace, true inner peace and liberation from suffering, says Heinrich? Transform our ignorance into wisdom. Compassion, a very loving, open heart, and a deep inquiry into the nature of our essential ignorance as to who we are. I mean, that's where inner peace and liberation from suffering comes from. As long as we mistake the cause and origins of suffering, we're going to continue to create suffering when we're trying to eliminate it. And of course, to eliminate suffering is the point. That is why we're here. This is what this is all about. So who are you? You're not any concept that you have of yourself. As I was talking about in the very, very beginning, set aside all concepts, all ideas. Set aside all reactions. Set aside your resistance to this or that, to emotions, to thoughts, to sensations. Set aside all your aspirations, all your desires, all the ways you wish things would be. And when setting all of those aside, including the desire for enlightenment, including the desire for inner peace and liberation from suffering, set all of it aside. Everything that can possibly be set aside. What's left? If something can be set aside, it's not yours. It's not you. Can it? I can set all my clothes aside. I can set all my possessions aside because they're not me. I can set all my thoughts aside because they're not me. All my emotions, all my sensations, all my meanings, all my associations, all my relationships, all of that I can set aside. So what remains? What cannot be set aside? Whatever that is, it's you. Now the thing is the moment you do that, a concept forms as to who this I is that can't be set aside. Well, you got to set that aside too. You have to remember that who you really are cannot be conceptualized. It cannot be thought. It cannot be conceived. It is the Tao. It cannot be spoken even. When I look at myself, I have no words. I can't describe it. All I can do is point out what it is not. And anything that you can perceive can't be you. So all your perceptions, set them aside. Now this doesn't mean you deny your life. This is the non-dual meditation, the non-dual inquiry. Okay, I'm not that. Then what remains? What can I not put away, set aside, let go of? Anything that I can hold on to or let go of cannot possibly be me, because I'm holding it. But I'm not holding myself. There alone is where you will find genuine peace and genuine liberation from suffering. Because all suffering arises from the ignorance as to who you really are. Does that answer it for you, Heinrich? Do you want me to elaborate? Mary says, I love your answer to Mystic Poet about prayer. Very good. Love devotion more than jnani. Bhakti is much more better than jnani. For some, it is. Yes. For some, it is. For some, it is not. I have a very hard time with bhakti, with being devoted. I had to understand before I could devote. So jnana was the path for me. But it can also be the path of, there's Raja Yoga, there's 8 different paths of yoga. And they're all They're all significant. They all come to the same place. They eventually all coalesce into jnana, which is literally means the sublimation of wisdom. But you cannot know yourself without a devotion to it. You can't do a half-hearted meditation and expect to get the same results of somebody who's doing a wholehearted meditation. I mean, that was the whole meaning behind the mythology of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, who just said, I'm just not getting up until I have the answer to suffering. He didn't have an answer, and he stopped looking for one. He just sat down. He went into shikantaza, to just sit. And after 8 days of just sitting, early in the morning he looked up and there was Venus, the morning star. And all separation between himself and everything in the universe simply vanished. It was gone. The star was he, the ground was he, the earth was he, everything was he, every living being was he. As he later said, when I attained the great, unparalleled, unexcelled enlightenment, simultaneously all beings attained the great, unparalleled enlightenment. What a statement. And yet, if you look at the Buddhist sutras, about half of them are jnani, or jnana, this absolute specification of the utter absolute non-dual truth of being. You look at the Lotus Sutra, the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Cutter Sutra, the Lankavatara Sutra. But the other half are all how to live. The Eightfold Path starts with right views, but then it goes into right living, right relationship. It's always this dance between the human and the divine. To know that you are nothing is wisdom. To know that you are everything is love. Between these two, my life flows. It is the dance between bhakti and jnani. Jay says, I mainly feel this when I'm driving, so there's an inherent fear to the practice during that time. Yeah, well, the driving can just get boring too, and the mind wants to kind of shut down. Totally get it. That's one of the main reasons why I dislike my job, because I can't use my work as a practice. How do I find peace with that? Oh, there's no such thing as work that isn't a practice. What else are you going to do? What is it, just what you're kind of doing on the side and then you go home and do a practice? That's kind of a small view of practicing, isn't it? If by practice you mean I can't drive a truck and close my eyes and meditate, well, no, you can't do that. But the practice is simply being mindful, being aware of every feeling that's running through your body, being vigilantly conscious of all the thoughts that are running through the mind. What am I thinking about during the day? What distractions do I have? It becomes a way of being the living Buddha every moment. Well, how would Buddha drive a truck? There's a great little practice. There's a koan for you. How does Buddha drive a truck? But then just be the Buddha. The Buddha would drive the truck just like Jay drives the truck. Buddha Jay. Yeah. Like Shakyamuni Buddha, there's Pillai Buddha. Jay says, thank you. Have to get ready for work. Today's a late start. Ari Om, everyone. Catch you later. Hassan says, I think the majority of saints reached enlightenment through devotion and love. I have no idea. The only thing I know is that there's no other tradition that has produced more enlightened beings than Buddhism. And Buddhism is the dance between it is the middle way. between jnani and bhakti, between devotion and wisdom. Because you can't attain enlightenment without wisdom, but you can't attain wisdom without compassion, because the two are one. And so don't make it one or the other. Because the moment you make it one or the other, you've cut yourself off from what? You've narrowed your world. Right? It is not. It's neither this nor that, nor both nor neither. It is simply this. The greatest insight you can possibly have is that life is this. And this is you. And don't stop anywhere on that, be it the wisdom side or the compassion side. I know so many non-dual teachers who are stuck on the wisdom side. Right? And I know people who are stuck on the devotion side. It is this. This is the true way. This is the true middle way. The person, and he is the oft forgiving, the most loving, from the Quran. Indeed, those who have attached faith and have done righteous deeds, the All-Merciful will give them love. Amen. Amen. Attain faith and have done righteous deeds. Well, there you are. Hello, Peter in Italy. Good to see you. There's the mystic poet again. Thanks for this warm answer. Yes, there is this idea of the beloved and seeking union for it. And for me, I feel it deeply. However, I catch myself immersed in that fearful scenarios and I feel hopeless. Love you too, Babaji. When I look the outside and nothing changed, I feel I'm not doing well. I'm not praying correctly. I'm not uttering the right words. Then I feel sorry, that I feel hopeless, and it's a tiring, exhausting circle. Pray for me, my Sheikh. Indeed I will. Indeed I will. Yes. We beat ourselves up because our experience of life doesn't seem to match our aspiration for the pure experience of and expression of faith, which is your name, by the way. Of course you know, but other people didn't know that. It is, and be patient with yourself. Be patient with yourself. As the evidence compounds, as we rely more and more on our own internal sense and less on the external conditions, then faith becomes something that is not dependent upon external conditions. It isn't checking the watch to see if we're enlightened yet or if the circumstances have changed. But while you're still in the state where we are checking to see if the circumstances have changed, then don't beat yourself up. Go, oh, there it is again. There it is again, inviting me into yet a deeper sense of what it means to be fully human. And I mean that with all my heart. Be fully human. Embrace the doubts. Embrace the wounds. Embrace all of it with compassion and love. And you'll find the transcendence to be in the compassion you have for it. Janet, the pain was excruciating, indeed. That's the pain of shame. It surely is. The pain of shame is, well, there's nothing worse. To feel as if you're inherently flawed and there's nothing you can do about it, and yet it wasn't your fault. Even if it was true, it wasn't your fault. Other people will be praying for you as well, Faith. Mary, so suffering is always due to resistance? Yes, for the most part, yes. Be free of the resistance and see what's left. All unnecessary suffering is certainly due to resistance. Nothing can undo the pains of life. right? I mean, if I lose a loved one for whatever reason, that is going to create suffering. It's going to create pain. I'm going to grieve. Now, if I resist that grief, or I try to tell myself that I shouldn't be feeling that, or right, I get over it, or whatever, I'm creating more suffering on top, completely unnecessary. Whereas, what is what is the most appropriate response to grief? It's to grieve. To completely and openly, open-heartedly just grieve the loss, because life is like that. Everything you gain in life is going to be lost. Even the things most dear to you are going to fall away. This is the nature of life itself. This is what Buddha meant by that life is suffering. As long as we are attached to things, that we have created another level of suffering that's completely unnecessary. But if we acknowledge with our whole hearts, our whole being, that yes, life is impermanent, it does one of two things. It eases the suffering of loss, but it also makes this moment precious, because this moment is going to pass. It makes every relationship you have more precious. It leads every experience you've ever had more precious, because they're irreproducible. They're like nothing's ever going to be like that ever, ever, ever again. So even the experience of loss now has a nobility to it. It's the reason it's called the Four Noble Truths. There is a nobility to it. There's a dignity to it. There's a sacredness. There's a making life sacred. Life as it is, not as we wish it would be, but as it actually is. The person. Death and life, good and evil, are just a test. You have a limited period of time because it is a test. We stand with goodness and support it. Welcome to paradise. Death and life, good and evil, are just a test. Well, who's being tested? Right. I know that is an Islamic view, but my main experience with Islam is that of the Sufi, in which death and life, good and evil, that there's nobody there to be tested, that God alone exists. And does God test oneself? Hardly. Good, evil, life, death, they are just illusions. They're the sense that somehow that which is impermanent is supposed to be permanent. And this is the true nature of goodness. It's the recognition that life is eternal, that God is life itself. And because life is inherently good, evil does not exist. And if it's a test to determine whether it exists or not, well then indeed it is a test. And what's the correct answer to the test? Evil is an illusory negation of that which is. And if there's nothing but good, you can even drop the word good. It simply is what is. GP, I don't think you, GP, was cruel to anybody. Maybe not. You know, once you have tasted it, once you have tasted that liberation, and just a little taste is all it's required. And once you've seen the impact of the cruelty that others have expressed and inflicted on you, and the cruelty you've inflicted on others, well, once you've really seen it, it's not possible to be cruel to anybody any longer. The memory, even the impulse to do so, creates a sense of disgust, of revulsion. Father forgives them, they don't know what they're doing. Amen. Amen. There is no hell awaiting anybody, person. There's no hell awaiting anybody. Ignorance is innocence. No. Innocence is wisdom. Tebi, if there's no self, then what is self-forgiveness? Like, sometimes we say that I forgive myself, I forgive you. Who's forgiving whom? Would there be any accountability for injustice? How do we interfere with our destined path? How do we know that we are on the path of the beloved? I would encourage you to stay away from things like there's no self, it's all an illusion, and that sort of thing, and stick instead with the forgiveness, which is the discovery of your own essential innocence. I only say that because it can become very confusing when we have merely the concept of no self without a direct experience of no self. So don't worry about it. Because if it's misunderstood, you are going to have the experience of nihilism. There won't be any accountability for injustice. Anybody can do anything to anyone and it doesn't matter. And there are some non-dual teachers who actually have taken that position. Some that are even well known. And as a result have done things that, well, are not befitting a teacher. Sexual impropriety, financial impropriety, a lot of things like that, because they become unaccountable. You can't interfere with your destined path. You can only ignore it or accept it. And how do you know you're on the path? Are you becoming more kind? Are you becoming more pensive and contemplative? Are you slower to anger? Are you more compassionate? Are you more magnanimous in your feeling? Are you more equanimous towards others? Are you slower to anger? Those are the signs that the truth is getting in, that the truth is, in fact, penetrating through the darkness and awakening you to who you really are. Those are the characteristics to look for. There is only the path of the beloved. Amen, Ella. How can I change my self-talk? Share any techniques, please. Stop trying to change it and instead just watch it. The moment we start trying to change things, we turn those things into an entity that somehow we're at war with. Instead, withdraw, take a step back. Your self-talk is our habits that have developed, not of your doing. Most of them have come from childhood, things that happened to you. You're not guilty. None of this is your fault. The fact that you have ugly or negative or self-condemning self-talk is not your fault. You're not to blame for this. So instead, imagine you've encountered a little kid, and the little kid is just saying all these terrible things about themselves. Oh, I'm so terrible, and I'm so stupid, and my mommy doesn't love me, and on it goes. Right? What would you do with that little child? Would you try talking to it, saying, "That's not true. You shouldn't think like that. Don't." I mean, it's just the same kind of pressure that got him in the position in the first place. What would you do? Well, the first thing you do is just to kind of take them in your arms and hold them. You would demonstrate love towards them. Wouldn't fight with them. Wouldn't even contradict them at first. You'd just say, I'm here with you. Tell me what's on your heart. Tell me what's going on with you. And as you do that, something begins to open. So that's the That's the technique that I would do. That's the way I would start with it, by acknowledging that there's a part of you that deeply, deeply, deeply needs love. And our job is to give it that love. You could call it inner child work if you like. I don't mind. It's good enough way to say it. But so anyway, I'm speeding up here because we're at the 2-hour mark. Ava, yes, calm, silence, presence. It's not in between some suffering, stress. It's always here, behind all experiences. When listening to you, it's obvious. However, it's not seen when in the middle of experience. Well, then I would say, who is it? Who is it? Right? That is witnessing its presence or its absence. Keep your attention there. So that the mind, which is saying, it's not easy when you're right in the middle of it, when you're right in the thick of it, it's not easy. That's just the mind saying it's not easy. Who said? Is it hard to be what you already are? Is it hard for your eye to see? Is it hard for your nose to breathe? Is it hard for your hair to grow? This is what you are, right? This is what you are, and it's simply the mind which continues to deny it, to point to something else. Yeah, we're almost there, a little bit more experience, and then we're going to be enlightened. Wherever you turn, that's where Allah's countenance is. I agree. All embracing, all knowing. Wherever the eye lands, you see the face of Allah, or God, or Jehovah, or Buddha, whatever you want to call him. Brent, love and appreciate you too. Thanks for your guidance, Ken. Hassan, true. I alone am Allah. Amen. Hassan, GP. This will be my last question. On this path, I feel attacked energetically. Are there true evil spirits and demonic spirits? Listen to Muji, he says there could be other forms of consciousness. Is there good, then there is evil. If by good you mean simply behaviors and ethics and morality and that sort of thing, then the answer is no. Then the answer is yes. From that point of view, you'd have to have evil and good as a pair. But then which is which? Everybody who does evil thinks they're doing good. Everybody who does, as does everybody who does, nobody thinks they're doing evil. If you look at what evil actually is, which is a total negation of life, nobody's doing that. Nobody gets up in the morning to decide how can they best screw up their life today. Nobody does that. Evil is an illusion. It is a misunderstanding of good. It is simply love that has gotten so compressed, so self-focused on the false sense of self, that it harms others, believing somehow it can be benefited through harming others. That's all there is to evil. That's all there is. And that is hell. That's all there is to hell. So no, there are not evil and demonic spirits outside of our belief in them. If I believe in a demonic spirit, I will have the experience of a demonic experience, even though there is no demon there. Right? As Joseph Campbell put it, he says, all the devils, all the gods, all the demons, and all the angels are all you. They are all you. Once you realize that, you see what the only reality that they possess is the reality that you gives them. And you alone are the arbiter of reality. Why is that? Because you are the reality. What do you know is absolutely true other than your own existence? You know nothing else. And Muji would agree with this, by the way. I know he would. Hassan, GP, why can't we just join and ask you the questions? Subscribe to the Looking Class. Oh yeah, that's true. I do have a subscription service where I do every other Wednesday. It's true. Oh, can I join it? Gee, I should have the... Oh, it's homeschool.ca/LC. I think that's what it is. Send an email to support@homeschool.co. I think I may have support, angel support, or to here. You can do this. Send it to Lisa as to how to get in it, and she'll either she or I will get back to you as to how to get into the looking class. I find until we accept death, we will not live fully. Yeah, there's truth to that. There's truth to that. I'm buzzing through here now because there's still quite a long list of things. Thank you, GP. You're welcome, Jane. Thank you for all your quotes, person. I look at you, I see a magnificent human with a big heart, says Shanae. Oh, Shanae. It's obvious on his face. Thank you all. Thank you. The divine dance. Many concepts is on as well. Zen Buddhism and Sufism. These are two paths. The person, Quran, San, Stephen. Carl Jung said, whoever looks outside dreams, whoever looks within awakens. Yes, thank you, GP. You're welcome, Hassan. Well said, brother. Mystic, I promise I will do. I heard once talking about faith, maybe it was what St. Paul's definition of. Thanks, everyone. I will live my human life fully. I will remember this in feeling and down moments. Very good. Hey, Dale, good to see you. Hope we're well. Yes, you're a moment one of a kind. Cherish it. Come to Satsang. All right, I'm going to have to put this user in timeout. Just a little bit too cluttering. Break the Spell says, I've tapped for years on forgiving myself and others, but don't feel I've made any headway. I'm fatigued and in constant pain that moves through my body. Never have a day where I feel good. Boy, wish I would have run across this much earlier in the time here. This may sound hard to hear, but I'm going to say it anyway, and that is that we have to be willing to take responsibility for our experience. And we get this sense that somehow there's this magic ingredient that we're missing, that if I could just find this, then all of my problems would be solved. Everything would just go away, everything would just be perfect. Well, that's never actually the truth. It's always somehow, through our actions, through our thinking, through our feelings, we bring things about to ourselves. The technique of tapping, like the technique of EMDR, or the technique of self-inquiry, the technique of meditation are not the solution. They are only tools in the toolbox. They are only as effective as the hand that's using them. And so what I would recommend to you is a humble saying to yourself, somehow, through some mechanism that I don't understand, I have brought myself into this state where I'm fatigued, I'm in constant pain in my body, and I never experience a day in which I feel good. I am suffering, that there is suffering. Such a recognition, well, it may seem harsh on the surface, this was the first of the Four Noble Truths that Buddha recognized, that he himself went through. He recognized there was suffering. That the whole story, which is predominantly mythological about his upbringing and the like. But the whole story was he had discovered suffering. He was just overwhelmed by the suffering in the world. And my guess is that the truth of the man's experience was he was overwhelmed by his own suffering. Now, if we can turn towards that suffering, rather than simply some kind of technique that's going to bring us a relief. Now, again, I'm all for techniques to bring about some relief, but no technique that brings a relief in the symptoms brings a solution to the problem, because the problem lies much, much deeper. The problem lies in our essential relationship that we have with life. As long as we are in an antagonistic relationship with life, there is going to be unnecessary suffering. So, come to terms with the fact that you are suffering. And you probably think, oh, I have, but really dig into it. Dig into the suffering. Ask yourself, what is the real cause of this suffering? Is it just because I have these feelings in my body, or is there something else here? Is there something deeper? Use it as an opportunity for the deepest kind of spiritual inquiry you can possibly make. At that point, suffering is serving its purpose to bring you back home, to bring you back into the kind of inquiry that will eventually free you from all suffering. There is suffering. There is a cause to suffering. There's an end to suffering, and there's a means to that end. And that means to that end is a way of life. It's not a technique, however good the technique is. And I guess I'll leave it with that. Mary said, please go back to my question about forgiveness. Did I miss something here, Mary? Suffering is always due to resistance. I don't see one other than that, Mary. So, thank you, G. You're welcome, Break the Spell. I hope that doesn't sound too harsh, because I know what it's like to suffer and not see any kind. Well, ask it again, Mary, if you would, please. I can't find it. It can seem kind of harsh, but if life truly is our practice, then whatever life is dishing out to us is what our practice for today is. That's how I look at my own life. And I have not lived a charmed life by any stretch. I ain't no senator's son, as Creedence Clearwater put it so beautifully. It ain't me, babe. Forgiveness is simply the recognition of your own innocence. That's it. That's what Christ meant when he used the word. I mean, to be found not guilty, to be vindicated of all wrongdoing. You're innocent. I had a question about being shamed as a child. I answered somebody's question about being, I guess it was Janet, who had that question about being shamed as a child. Anyway, if you can type it in again quick, otherwise it's time for me to bring it to a close for today. I'll give you another minute there, Mary, but maybe the answer I gave to Janet was adequate. And then in your future you act it out. Yes. Being shamed forms an identity as one who is shameful, one who has to hide, remain small, one who doesn't get their needs met, one who assumes that they're not going to get their needs met and therefore doesn't even ask for anything. But I say the same thing, the same question. What if it's not true? What if it wasn't your fault? And on that note, I'm going to let it go because I'm getting weary. Maybe you can hear it in my voice. speaking constantly now for the last couple hours. So, anyway, thanks to you all. Thanks for being here. I hope what I've offered has helped bring you back to yourselves, bring you back to your life, and to really appreciate how deeply valuable you are and how deeply significant your human life is. All my love to you. Namaste.